The fluorescent lights of the conference room seemed to hum with Marcus's barely concealed contempt. My stomach twisted as his lawyer slid the final papers across the polished mahogany table. I looked at Marcus, my soon-to-be ex-husband, expecting some flicker of remorse or generosity, but his gaze was cold, sharp, and utterly dismissive. He leaned forward, tapping a manicured finger on the final financial summary. "Honestly, Alara," he sneered, his voice dropping just low enough to sound intimate, yet loud enough for everyone to hear. "Based on your earning potential before we met, you're worth barely anything to me in this settlement. Call it $5,000 and a cheap car." The phrase worthless didn't leave his lips, but the sentiment hung in the air like poison. The shock was immediate, a physical blow. He made 7 figures. $5,000 was an insult, a final act of calculated humiliation. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I swallowed the rage. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling violently, and signed the papers. My eyes locked onto his, conveying a silent promise. This isn't over. You just signed your own divorce from reality. The silence, punctuated only by the scratch of my signature, felt deafening. I drove away from the law firm that afternoon in the cheap car he had designated for me. It was a faded, dented sedan, a humiliation Marcus clearly orchestrated. Within minutes, a text arrived from his number, V's old ride. Better than nothing, right? V was Veronica, his perpetually judgmental mother, whose disdain for me was legendary. The message confirmed it was intentional, a final, spiteful gesture designed to remind me of my perceived low status in their gilded world. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I pulled into a deserted parking lot and began cleaning out the car. The interior smelled faintly of old perfume and mothballs. Underneath a crumpled fast food wrapper in the glove compartment, my fingers brushed against a thick stack of papers. It wasn't trash. It was a photocopy of a schedule of assets. I pulled it out, my heart starting to pound with sudden, terrifying intensity. The top page was labeled with something called Phoenix Holdings, LLC. My mind raced as I scanned the document. It detailed an investment portfolio, a huge one, initiated just 3 months after Marcus and I had officially separated. The funds listed weren't his typical inheritance money. They were traceable back to significant chunks of our shared savings, money he had sworn was gone in a failed, vague business restructuring. This wasn't just a portfolio, it was his secret, high-risk, high-reward bet that had clearly paid off handsomely. The settlement I had just signed for $5,000 and the sedan guaranteed he kept every penny of this substantial wealth, simply because the firm was incorporated after our separation and he had successfully obscured the source of the initial capital. My shock gave way to a cold, focused fury. He hadn't just insulted my worth, he had actively cheated me, and the proof was now resting in my lap, tucked inside his mother's hand-me-down car. The Phoenix Holdings LLC name was a generic placeholder, but the listed assets were anything but. It was a critical, crucial clue. A month later, I stood in the small, empty living room of the house we once shared, surrounded by boxes containing the meager portion of my life I was allowed to keep. Fighting Marcus legally would require hundreds of thousands of dollars I didn't possess. The $5,000 settlement was already earmarked for rent and necessities. I held the Phoenix Holdings document, recognizing that this was less about fighting for the old life and more about fueling the new one. I wouldn't waste my energy on a drawn-out legal battle. I would focus on creating a reality so far beyond Marcus's comprehension that the settlement would look like pocket change. I used the remaining cash to book a one-way ticket and a small, temporary rental apartment in the city where I had always dreamed of working. I packed quickly, feeling a profound sense of lightness. I was shedding not just Marcus, but the version of myself who believed his lies. As the moving truck pulled away, I had officially cut all ties. I felt a surge of nervous excitement mixed with disbelief as I sat in the lobby of Omnitech, the firm Marcus had always scoffed at as overly ambitious for your skill set. The job was an entry-level position in data analysis, but it was in a highly competitive, lucrative sector. During the final interview, the director asked about my abrupt career pivot after years away. I didn't mention the divorce. Instead, I transformed the pain into a compelling narrative of hunger and self-discovery. I realized that for too long, I let others define my value. I explained, leaning in earnestly. I had a wake-up call about my worth. Now I'm here to prove that my potential is far higher than anyone, including myself, ever priced it at. My voice trembled slightly, but the conviction was real. That night, after hours of agonizing silence, my temporary phone, a cheap burner, lit up with a text from the recruiter, "They want you. HR will be in touch with the full package. Congratulations." The moment the contract was signed, I knew I was rebuilding. 3 weeks later, my focus was absolute. Learning the industry, outperforming expectations, and staying invisible to my past. The first major interruption came in the form of a vile text message. Veronica, Marcus's mother, had tracked down my new, temporary work number through an old mutual acquaintance. The message was purely venom. "So glad you settled so easily. Marcus is already dating someone much more suitable. Don't try to contact him. Your history." It was meant to wound, to make me feel replaceable and forgotten. But instead of sadness, it cemented my resolve. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about crushing the belief held by the entire controlling family that I was easily discarded. Their constant need to rub salt in the wound only clarified the precision with which I needed to execute my long-term plan. I deleted the message, but the words were burned into my memory, the final motivation I needed. My first day at Omnitech was a blur of high-stakes meetings and complex data models. I thrived on the chaos, finally feeling challenged and useful. I worked 12-hour days, often eating dinner at my desk, embracing the demanding schedule. My colleagues, impressed by my sudden dedication, assumed I was a ruthless climber, but I was simply running away from the past and toward a future where Marcus couldn't reach me. A coworker, Ben, casually asked why I moved so far so quickly. "I left everything behind for this opportunity," I replied honestly. I had a wake-up call about my value. As I settled into my cubicle later that evening, organizing my sparse personal effects, a forgotten item fell from a small, dusty box. It was an old, ornate Christmas card, Marcus's handwriting scrawled across the front, from a time before the bitterness, addressed to his parents. A chilling idea, cold and brilliant, started to form. The official offer letter arrived via encrypted email, and I nearly fell off my chair. I had negotiated well, leveraging my experience and the desperation I had spun into ambition. The starting annual salary was a staggering $480,000. My mind, still calibrated to Marcus's demeaning $5,000 and a cheap car, struggled to process the figure. I immediately pulled up the payroll schedule. My first month's net pay, including a small signing bonus and deducting taxes, was precisely $40,000. I stared at the sum, a number that was exactly 8 times the entire settlement Marcus had claimed was my total financial worth. The realization hit me like a physical punch. The sheer magnitude of his financial dismissal was breathtakingly foolish. I finally understood the power I had just gained. I minimized the document and, using my new high-speed internet, discreetly researched Marcus's current neighborhood. He was still living in the same house. The target was stationary. With the date of my first paycheck fast approaching, I prepared the delivery method. I walked into a small, bespoke stationery boutique downtown, choosing the thickest, most expensive ivory cardstock I could find, the kind of paper that signaled serious money and refined taste, everything Marcus pretended to be, but wasn't. I carefully selected an elegant, minimalist Christmas card, completely devoid of sentimentality. The goal was impact, not warmth. I also purchased a heavy, unmarked envelope. Everything had to be meticulously perfect, the presentation a stark contrast to the rusty sedan he'd left me. As the sales clerk wrapped the items, I caught my reflection in the polished glass of the display case. Gone was the perpetually anxious, downtrodden woman of the marriage. I looked calm, powerful, and frighteningly determined. The woman Marcus had deemed worthless was unrecognizable, replaced by someone who held a new, very expensive card in her hand. While eating lunch in the break room a few days later, I overheard 2 senior analysts discussing industry gossip. They spoke in hushed tones about a massive financial error that was crippling Marcus's mid-sized investment firm, a negligent mistake made by a high-level executive. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. They mentioned the executive's name, Bartholomew Hayes. My heart hammered. Bartholomew Hayes was one of the two main individuals listed on the Phoenix Holdings LLC document as a key investor, the same document I found in Veronica's car. It wasn't my doing, but Marcus's world was already starting to collapse from the inside, independent of my actions. The financial empire he had built on secrecy and contempt was shaking. This wasn't merely good luck. It was proof that the ethical rot I had experienced in my marriage extended into his professional life. It meant the coming revelation would hit him even harder, compounded by his existing vulnerabilities. The day my first paycheck cleared, I felt a dizzying mix of elation and cold resolve. I meticulously printed out a hard copy of the $40,000 check. I sat down with the expensive Christmas card, holding the pen steady. I wrote a single, surgical sentence inside. Happy holidays, Marcus. You said I was worthless in the settlement. I thought I'd send you a little proof of my new value. I signed it with only my first initial, E. I slipped the folded check into the card, sealed it in the unmarked envelope, and addressed it to his house. I walked out of the building, the envelope tucked securely in my hand. I didn't use the office mailbox. I walked a mile to a high-security, downtown post office, ensuring the package would be properly handled. Dropping the heavy envelope into the slot, a powerful, final sense of control washed over me. I wasn't just mailing a check. I was delivering a reckoning. It was Christmas Eve. I was alone in my quiet, new apartment, watching the snow fall over the city, feeling surprisingly content. Simultaneously, I pictured the scene miles away. Marcus and Veronica were at his sprawling, brightly decorated house, exchanging gifts. The mail arrived late. Marcus, bored and complacent, was sitting by the fireplace when he saw the heavy, unmarked envelope on the stack. He smirked, assuming it was a late-season client gift. He tore it open, pulling out the elegant card. He read the inscription, his face already twisting in annoyance. Then he pulled out the neatly folded paper. His smirk vanished, replaced by a look of absolute, slack-jawed horror as he unfolded the $40,000 check. Veronica, sensing the shift, snatched it from his hand. She saw the figure, the amount, the bank name. "This can't be real," she shrieked, her voice high and frantic. "Where did you get this, Marcus? Who is thisy?" The following morning, Boxing Day, the call came. My temporary work phone, which I rarely use for personal calls, showed a restricted number. I knew immediately who it was. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Ilara, you need to tell me what this is." Marcus's voice was high-pitched, raw with panic. "Where did you get $40,000? You signed the settlement. You can't have hidden assets. Are you trying to sue me? What is your game?" He was spiraling, the arrogance gone, replaced by terrified confusion. I remained silent, letting him hang himself with his own paranoia. After he paused, demanding an explanation, I spoke, my voice low and completely devoid of emotion. "It's just the first installment of my new life, Marcus." I disconnected the call. He immediately tried calling back. I didn't answer. I knew he was already driving toward his lawyer's office, worried about my hidden assets and the potential loophole I might exploit. Marcus met with his divorce lawyer, a pompous man named Mr. Finch. Marcus demanded to know if I could retroactively sue him, now that I was clearly wealthy. Mr. Finch delivered the first major blow. "The settlement is final, Marcus. However, a $40,000 check out of the blue is highly irregular." As they discussed strategy, Mr. Finch paused, looking uncomfortable. "And Marcus, I need to address this. Your mother, Veronica, called me yesterday asking if she could sue Ilara for the money you settled with her from her accounts." The room went silent. Marcus stared at his lawyer. The check was only $5,000, but Veronica's frantic call implied she saw some financial threat in my success. Marcus felt a cold realization. Veronica had been tracking and meddling with his personal accounts, potentially using her own money for the settlement payment, and now feared I had stumbled upon a truth that implicated them both. He was caught between a suddenly successful ex-wife and a manipulative mother. I needed to officially close the last remaining joint bank account, a forgotten relics of our past. I met the bank manager, Mrs. Alston, who handled the paperwork efficiently. As she finalized the closure, she commented, "You know, your ex-husband and his mother inquired about the balance just last week. Seems they were trying to track your funds." I feigned nonchalance. Then came the twist. Mrs. Alston checked the transaction history one last time. "That's strange," she murmured. "There was a small wire transfer, $3,000, from a company called Phoenix Holdings, LLC, that went into this account the day after the divorce was finalized. It was immediately withdrawn. Looks like a data entry mistake on their end." My blood ran cold, but I kept my composure. It wasn't money for me. It was Marcus's mistake, linking his secret account directly to a joint account, the final, undeniable proof I needed to connect him to the shady portfolio I had discovered months ago. With the confirmation from the bank and the document I found in the car, I had everything I needed. But I wouldn't launch a direct legal fight. That's what Marcus expected. Instead, I decided on a strategic reveal. I used an anonymous email address and tipped off a prominent, vicious financial investigative blogger known for targeting unethical investment bankers. My tip was specific. Look into the connections between Marcus's company, Executive Capital, and a small, opaque shell company called Phoenix Holdings, LLC. Potential conflict of interest, negligence, and hidden assets. I made it look like the work of a disgruntled former employee with insider knowledge. The goal wasn't just revenge. It was to use the truth to expose the systemic lack of ethics he lived by. The blogger replied almost instantly, his digital enthusiasm palpable. "This is huge. Need proof. Can you provide any documents?" My calculated move had an immediate, if predictable, social response. Veronica, unable to stand the thought of me having wealth, posted a vicious, cryptic Facebook status about me faking her wealth and being a gold digger who lost everything. It was the usual spiteful tirade. However, this time, the cruelty backfired. A mutual friend, disgusted by Veronica's ongoing harassment, anonymously forwarded me a photograph she had taken at a private function. It showed Marcus smiling proudly, arm in arm with his new girlfriend. I froze when I saw the girlfriend's face. I recognized her immediately from industry articles. She was the daughter of the CEO of his largest and fiercest competitor. Marcus, already on thin ice financially, was now dangerously mixing professional and personal loyalties, giving his biggest rival a perfect entry point into his private life. His negligence was truly boundless. Marcus was clearly losing control. A few days after the financial blogger story started to gain traction, he showed up at my old, empty apartment building, believing I must still be local and hiding. He called my temporary work phone, leaving a rambling, panicked, 5-minute voicemail. He started with an apology that quickly devolved into pathetic pleading, attempting to negotiate our relationship back, not out of love, but out of fear of his looming financial collapse. "Ilara, baby, look, we can fix this. We can share this wealth of yours," he stammered. "Don't ruin me. You know I love you." I listened to the entire message, a faint smile playing on my lips. His desperation was the sweetest music. Halfway through his plea, I heard a distinctive sound in the background, a brief, loud police siren wailing past the empty street. I finally deleted the voicemail, feeling nothing but a profound sense of closure. It was time to escalate. I attached the photocopy of the Phoenix Holdings document, the one I found in the car, to an anonymous email and sent it to the financial blogger, labeling it as the source of shady capital. The blogger didn't hesitate. Within hours, a massive expose dropped, detailing the complex web of shell companies, conflict of interest, and hidden investment portfolios Marcus had created to illegally shield assets and leverage high-risk deals. The market reacted instantly. Marcus's company stock plummeted, and his personal wealth evaporated faster than morning mist. The revelation was not fabricated. It was simply the truth Marcus had fought so desperately to hide. I had tanked his entire career, not by crafting a lie, but by merely revealing the facts. It felt like the truest form of justice, letting his own corruption destroy him. The catharsis was overwhelming. The final, exquisite twist came a week later. I received a certified letter from the used car dealership that had taken the hand-me-down sedan as a trade-in after I moved. They explained that while processing the vehicle for resale, they had discovered a complex, hidden compartment installed behind the back seat. Inside was a folder of highly confidential original corporate files from Marcus's company, evidence he had meant to destroy before the divorce, but had utterly forgotten, leaving it in his mother's car. The files confirmed every single detail of the negligence and illegal transactions detailed in the financial expose. The dealership asked where they should send the sensitive files, as they were clearly important legal evidence. I stared at the letter, realizing that the car meant to humiliate me had, in fact, contained the final, fatal weapon against Marcus. The financial crash led to immediate repercussions. The CEO father of Marcus's new girlfriend used the highly public expose as leverage, not only terminating his daughter's relationship with the disgraced Marcus, but also launching a strategic, hostile takeover of Marcus's now vulnerable company. The same afternoon, Veronica called. Her voice was unrecognizable, no longer venomous, but weak and tearful. She begged me to call the blogger and claim the documents were falsified, pleading to save Marcus's reputation and career. In her desperation, she let slip the truth. She and Marcus had meticulously planned the worthless settlement together, using his firm's estimated downturn as a deliberate justification to financially shame and discard me. I ended the call. Her confession was the ultimate payoff. The full, sickening truth of their conspiracy was revealed in their moment of terror. A week before the new year, I was celebrating a massive contract win with my team at Omnitech. We toasted with vintage champagne, laughing and talking strategy. As the glasses clinked, I looked at my reflection in the window, a woman with real power, respected and financially independent. The original $40,000 check, which I had never cashed, suddenly seemed less like a weapon and more like a symbol. I realized the card wasn't truly an act of revenge against Marcus. It was a powerful, necessary gift to myself, a monetary manifesto of the worth I had created. The true recipient of the empowerment was Ilara. Just as I raised my glass for another sip, my secure phone rang. It was an investigator from the state's financial crimes unit, following up on the confidential corporate files discovered in the car. The investigator was direct. He confirmed that the confidential files, combined with the publicly available information from the expose, were enough to launch a full-scale legal inquiry into Marcus's business practices. The stakes were no longer financial, but criminal. The investigator thanked me for being forthcoming and confirmed that Marcus's career was over. They were moving to freeze all his personal and business assets. I calmly informed the investigator that I was fully willing to provide a formal deposition regarding the discovery of the highly sensitive documents in the car Marcus had given me. The final twist arrived when the investigator mentioned that Veronica had also been subpoenaed regarding the suspicious transfers and potential money laundering connected to Phoenix Holdings. The mother and son had been tied together in their downfall by their own greed. 2 weeks into the new year, I was flying first class to a major industry conference, a trip Marcus would have once sneered at as unnecessary. I opened my laptop and saw an article detailing the ongoing, highly publicized legal scandal engulfing Marcus and Veronica. He had lost his job, his primary home was being foreclosed upon, and his mother was fighting her own costly legal battles. I closed the laptop, feeling a profound, deep sense of serenity. I had no satisfaction in his ruin, only peace. I realized the only thing I had ever truly wanted wasn't his money or his suffering, but simply to reclaim my dignity and feel valuable again. I had done that. I had transformed the most painful moment of my life into the biggest professional success, proving his estimation of me was catastrophic for him. The feeling was not vengeance, it was freedom. The first thing I did when I returned home was to frame the $40,000 check, the original, uncashed, printed copy. It hung prominently on the wall of my sleek new home office, a daily, tangible reminder of the power of self-worth. It wasn't a boast. It was a historical artifact. I finally deposited my second month's check, which, thanks to unexpected bonuses, was even larger than the first. I poured a glass of champagne. Standing by the window of my apartment, looking out over the city I now owned a small piece of. I raised the glass in a silent, solitary toast. It wasn't a toast to revenge, but to resilience. The whole dramatic, painful journey could be summed up in one powerful truth. Marcus said I was worthless in the settlement. I used his insult to build a life where I'm worth everything to myself.